The first contraction hit just as Garrett raised his hand to sever our bond. I doubled over on the ceremonial stones, my swollen belly contracting so violently that the air left my lungs in a rush. Around me, the Silver Ridge pack fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on my humiliation. The full moon hung overhead like a judge, bathing everything in cold silver light that made the scene feel unreal, nightmarish. Isla? Garrett's voice carried uncertainty for the first time all evening, his hand still raised toward the moon in the traditional gesture of rejection. Before we go on, please take a moment to subscribe. These stories need you. Another contraction tore through me, stronger than the first, and I felt warm liquid gush down my legs. The ceremonial dress they'd forced me to wear, gray like ash, like morning, darkened with the fluid. My water had broken. Here, now. In front of everyone who had gathered to watch Garrett Blackwood, Alpha of Silver Ridge, reject his pregnant mate in favor of someone worthy. No, I gasped, clutching my belly. Not now. Please, not now. But my pup had other plans. The baby I'd carried for 8 months, the child Garrett had spent weeks claiming might not even be his, had chosen this moment to enter the world. Pain bloomed sharp and white-hot across my abdomen, stealing my ability to stand. My knees buckled. Hands caught me before I hit the stones. Elder Marin, her weathered face creased with concern, lowered me carefully to the ground. "The pup is coming," she announced, her voice cutting through the shocked whispers. "Quickly, someone fetch the midwife." Wait. A different elder stepped forward, ancient beyond measure, her milky eyes somehow seeing more than anyone present. Elder Thessa, her gnarled hand reached toward my belly, hovering just above the straining fabric. The timing, the full blood moon, the rejection ceremony interrupted. Her voice dropped to a reverent whisper. "It's the old prophecy." The crowd erupted in frantic murmurs. I could barely focus through the pain, but Thessa's next words cut through everything. "A child born during a severed bond, beneath the blood moon, carries the mark of the ancient ones. But there is a condition." Thessa's milky gaze swept across the assembled pack. "The child must be delivered by the hands of the blood emperors themselves, or the mark will fade, and the prophecy will be lost." My vision blurred with pain and tears. Blood emperors. The twin rulers of the northern territories. Creatures of legend who commanded both wolf and an older, darker power that ran through their veins like liquid night. No one had seen them in decades. They were myths, stories told to pups about power and dominance and the price of both. "That's impossible," Garrett protested, his authority reasserting itself despite the chaos I'd created. His green eyes, once warm when they looked at me, were cold now, calculating. "The blood emperors haven't been seen in 20 years. She'll deliver long before—" "Then we summon them." Elder Thessa's voice rang with command that even an alpha couldn't ignore. "Rider, take the fastest path through the shadow roads. Tell the blood emperors that the prophesied birth is happening. Tell them a child of 2 bloodlines requires their hands, or all will be lost." A young wolf at the edge of the circle didn't hesitate. His body exploded into fur and muscle, clothes shredding as his massive brown form burst forth. He was gone in seconds, disappearing into the forest faster than my pain-hazed mind could track. Another contraction seized me, and this time I couldn't contain my scream. The sound echoed across the ceremonial grounds, raw and animal and desperate. Through the haze of agony, I felt my wolf whimpering, confused and hurt by Garrett's rejection, by my body's rebellion, by everything spiraling out of control. "Isla?" Garrett crouched beside me, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or just discomfort at having his ceremony ruined. "Just hold on. The midwife is coming. No midwife can touch her." Thessa's voice was absolute. "The prophecy is clear. Only the blood emperors can deliver this child, or the mark will never form. If another touches the pup during birth, the child will be ordinary. The destiny will be broken." Horror washed through me, temporarily overriding the pain. give birth here, on these cold stones, in front of my entire pack, while waiting for legends who might not come? The humiliation of the rejection paled in comparison. "This is insane!" A sharp voice cut through the night. Lydia, the she-wolf Garrett had chosen over me, stepped into the ceremonial circle, her beautiful face twisted with irritation. She wore white, the color of a chosen mate, while I bled and labored in gray. "You're going to risk her life on some ancient fairy tale?" For a fleeting second, I felt gratitude toward the woman who'd stolen my mate. But Thessa's expression didn't change. "The prophecy is not negotiable. The child must be born here, under the blood moon, delivered by the Emperor's hands." Her gnarled fingers touched my shoulder with surprising gentleness. "Be strong, child. The goddess demands only what you can endure." I wanted to laugh at that. The goddess had already demanded more than I could endure. Watching Garrett choose another, carrying his child while he publicly questioned its paternity, being rejected while pregnant, reduced to ash-gray robes and pitying stares. But another contraction stole my breath, and survival became my only focus. The pack formed a circle around me, maintaining the ceremonial boundary while someone spread furs beneath my body. The stones were cold, unforgiving against my back. Elder Marin supported my shoulders, her presence steady, even as she couldn't help with the actual birth. Time dissolved into waves of pain. My body labored to bring forth life, while my heart splintered from rejection. I could feel the mate bond with Garrett fraying, unraveling thread by thread. The ceremony remained incomplete, suspended by my daughter's untimely arrival, but the damage was done. Every pack member here had witnessed his choice. "How long has it been?" I managed to gasp during a brief respite. "Nearly 2 hours," Elder Marin answered quietly. "The labor is progressing quickly." Too quickly. If the Blood Emperors didn't arrive soon, my daughter would be born without them. And the prophecy, if it even existed, would shatter. Part of me didn't care about destinies or ancient powers. I just wanted my baby to survive this premature labor, to be healthy and whole. But another part, the part that had just been publicly humiliated, clung desperately to the idea that my child might be special, might be destined for something greater than this pack that had watched my shame without protest. The wind shifted. Every wolf in the circle went rigid, their heads turning toward the forest edge in perfect unison. Power rolled across the ceremonial grounds like thunder before a storm, ancient and overwhelming and absolutely dominant. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against my skin with weight that made breathing difficult. My wolf, who had been whimpering in pain and sorrow, suddenly lifted her head, alert, trembling with something that wasn't quite fear. "They're here," Elder Thessa breathed, and I couldn't tell if her tone held relief or terror. Then I heard it. 2 sets of massive paws hitting earth at impossible speed, moving in perfect synchronization. The sound grew louder, closer, until the assembled pack parted like water before a blade. 2 wolves emerged from the darkness. They were massive, easily twice the size of any wolf I'd ever seen. One was pure black, his fur seeming to absorb the moonlight, making him look like a living shadow. The other was darkest gray, almost charcoal, with silver highlights that caught the blood moon's glow. Their eyes burned identical shades of crimson, not the natural amber of wolf eyes, but something older, something that spoke of power beyond the natural order. The Blood Emperors had come. They stood at the circle's edge, their crimson gazes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch despite my pain. For a long moment, neither moved. They simply watched me labor on the furs, their presence so overwhelming that I felt it pressing against every inch of my skin. Then they shifted. The transformation was fluid and instantaneous, power rippling across their forms as wolf gave way to man. They stood before me, and my pain-hazed mind struggled to process what I was seeing. They were identical, perfect mirrors of each other, though I somehow knew instantly which was which. The one who'd been pure black now stood on the left, his skin pale as moonlight, his hair falling past his shoulders in waves of absolute darkness. The one who'd been gray stood on the right, his coloring identical except for a single silver streak through his black hair. Both were tall, easily matching heights at 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and warriors' builds, barely contained by the dark clothing they wore. Their faces were all sharp angles and hard planes, beautiful in a dangerous way that made my wolf whimper for an entirely different reason. And those eyes, those crimson eyes, remained bright and piercing even in human form. But what struck me most was how they looked at me. Not with pity or disgust, but with something fierce and possessive that made my damaged heart stutter in my chest. "Everyone out!" the black-haired one spoke, his voice deep and commanding, brooking absolutely no argument. "Except the elders who know the ritual. Now!" The pack scattered immediately. Even Garrett backed away without protest, when those crimson eyes fixed on him for just a moment, unmistakable contempt burning in their depths. Lydia was ushered away by pack members, her protest dying when the gray-haired twins' gaze flicked to her. Only elders Thessa, Marin, and one other remained, positioning themselves at cardinal points around my makeshift birthing bed. The twins moved forward with synchronized grace, dropping to their knees on either side of me without any apparent concern for the blood and fluid staining the furs. Up close, their scent washed over me. Pine and snow and something wild and untamed, but underneath it ran something else. Something ancient and dark and utterly intoxicating that made my wolf keen with sudden, inexplicable longing. "We've got you," the black-haired one said quietly, his hand pressing gently against the top of my swollen belly. "Both of us," the silver-streaked one added, his hand joining his brother's on the other side. The moment their skin touched mine, something shifted. The pain didn't vanish, but it became manageable, bearable. My wolf stopped whimpering and instead surged forward, trying desperately to get closer to these males who smelled of power and safety and something else I couldn't name. "The pup is in distress." The black-haired twin's eyes never left my face, even as his hands moved expertly across my abdomen. The premature labor combined with the rejection stress, his jaw tightened. "This will be difficult." "Can you save her?" I gasped as another contraction built. "My daughter, please." "You'll both survive this." The silver-streaked one spoke with absolute certainty, as if he could command reality itself to bend to his will. His hand moved to cup my face, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "But you need to trust us. Can you do that?" I looked between them, these legendary creatures who had raced across territories to reach me, and saw nothing but fierce determination in their crimson eyes. I trusted them more than I'd trusted anyone in months. "Yes," I whispered. "Good." The black-haired twin's hand joined his brother's against my cheek, both of them framing my face with surprising tenderness. "Then let's bring your daughter into this world." The black-haired twin's hand moved from Isla's face back to her belly, his touch firm but gentle as he assessed the pup's position. His brother mirrored the movement on the opposite side, their hands working in perfect synchronization, as if they shared one mind between two bodies. "The pup is Breach," the silver-streaked one said, his voice tight with concentration. His fingers pressed carefully along Isla's side, feeling for the baby's position. "She's turned wrong. I can feel it." The black-haired twin's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath his pale skin. His crimson eyes met his brother's over Isla's body. "We need to turn her manually." Pain shot through Isla at his words, but it wasn't from another contraction. The thought of them reaching inside her, manipulating her unborn daughter while she lay exposed before the elders and the watching moon, made her want to disappear into the stones beneath her. The silver-streaked twin's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through her trembling ones. "Look at me," he commanded softly, and Isla's eyes snapped to his face against her will. There was something in his crimson gaze that demanded obedience, but not cruelly. Not at them, not at the pack. Not at your former mate. Just us. Can you do that? Isla nodded, unable to form words as another contraction built. His hand squeezed hers, grounding her, while his brother's hands moved lower on her belly. She felt the pressure of his touch through the thin fabric of her dress, felt him pressing, testing, searching for the right angle to turn her daughter. "What are your names?" she gasped, desperate for something to focus on besides the pain and the intimacy of their hands on her body. "Corvus," the black-haired one answered without looking up from his work. His hands pressed harder, and Isla bit back a cry. "I'm the elder by 3 minutes." "Caspian." The silver-streaked twin's thumb brushed across her knuckles in a soothing rhythm, and he never lets me forget those 3 minutes. Despite everything, Isla felt her lips twitch towards something that might have been a smile. The absurdity of it struck her, laboring on ceremonial stones, being touched by legendary blood emperors, and they were bickering like normal brothers. Corvus's hands stilled suddenly. "There." His voice carried satisfaction. "I can feel the head now, but turning her is going to hurt." "More than this already hurts?" Isla's laugh came out broken, edged with hysteria. "Yes." Caspian's honesty was brutal, but somehow comforting. His free hand moved to cup the back of her head, supporting her as another contraction seized her body. "But we'll be as gentle as we can, and it has to be done, or neither of you survives." Isla felt tears streaming down her temples, soaking into her hair. She wanted to be brave, wanted to endure this with dignity. But the pain was overwhelming, and the fear was worse. What if they couldn't turn the baby? What if her daughter died here, on these stones, because Isla's body was too weak, too broken by rejection to do this one simple thing? "Breathe with me." Corvus's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. His crimson eyes lifted to meet hers, and she saw something unexpected there. Tenderness. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Match my breathing." He demonstrated, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. Isla tried to follow, her breath hitching and stuttering at first, but Caspian's hand tightened on hers, anchoring her, and Corvus's gaze held her captive, demanding she focus only on him. "Good," Corvus murmured. "Just like that. Keep breathing." His hands moved, pressing firmly against the side of Isla's belly. She felt pressure, then a strange sliding sensation inside her as he began to turn the pup. The pain that followed was white-hot and all-consuming. Isla's back arched off the furs, a scream tearing from her throat. "Almost there," Corvus said, his voice strained. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. "Just a little more." Caspian's hand moved from behind her head to press against her shoulder, holding her steady as his brother worked. "You're doing so well," he whispered against her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "So strong. Just a little longer." Isla didn't feel strong. She felt like she was being torn apart from the inside, but their hands on her, their voices surrounding her, somehow made it bearable. She focused on Corvus's crimson eyes, on Caspian's thumb still stroking her knuckles, on their scents wrapping around her like a protective cocoon. Then suddenly, the pressure released. Isla gasped, her body going limp against the furs. "She's turned!" Corvus's hands gentled immediately, moving to cradle Isla's belly with surprising reverence. "The pup is in position now." "Can you feel her?" Caspian asked quietly, his hand moving to rest beside his brother's on Isla's stomach. Isla concentrated past the pain, past the exhaustion, and felt her daughter shift inside her. A tiny kick against her ribs, stronger than before. Relief flooded through her so intensely that fresh tears spilled over. "She's fighting," Isla whispered. "She's still fighting." "Of course she is." Corvus's expression softened in a way that transformed his harsh features into something breathtaking. "She's your daughter." The mate bond with Garrett chose that moment to fray another thread, sending a sharp spike of pain through Isla's chest that had nothing to do with labor. She gasped, her free hand flying to her heart, as if she could physically hold the pieces together. Both twins stiffened immediately, their heads turning in perfect unison toward where Garrett stood at the edge of the circle. The temperature around Isla seemed to drop 10 degrees. Power rolled off the blood emperors in waves, making the air thick and hard to breathe. He's continuing the rejection, Caspian said, his voice deadly soft. Even while you labor with his child. I can feel the bond breaking. Corvus's hands on Isla's belly tightened protectively. His crimson eyes burned brighter, and when he spoke again, his words carried enough command that every wolf in hearing distance flinched. If you sever that bond before this pup is safely delivered, Garrett Blackwood, I will personally tear you apart. Silence crashed over the ceremonial grounds. Even the wind seemed to stop, waiting. Garrett's face had gone pale, but he didn't back down. The ceremony was already begun. I have the right to complete it. You have the right to nothing. Caspian's voice matched his brother's in lethal promise. Not while she labors, not while the pup is in distress. You'll wait until we say otherwise, or you'll learn exactly why our title includes the word blood. The threat hung in the air, undeniable and terrifying. Isla felt rather than saw Garrett retreat, his presence fading from her awareness as he stepped back into the shadows beyond the circle. The fraying of the bond slowed, suspended, but not stopped. Another contraction built, stronger than any before. Isla cried out, her body bearing down instinctively. The need to push was overwhelming, consuming every other thought. That's it, Corvus encouraged, one hand moving to support her lower back while the other remained on her belly. Your body knows what to do. Listen to it. Caspian shifted position, moving to kneel between her legs while maintaining his hold on her hand. I need to check how dilated you are, he said, his tone apologetic but firm. I know it's invasive, but I have to know if you're ready to push. Isla couldn't find words to respond. She could only nod, her face burning with humiliation despite the agony. This was her worst nightmare. Being exposed and vulnerable before strangers, before her pack, before the male who'd rejected her. But Caspian's touch, when it came, was clinical and quick. His fingers were cool against her overheated skin, and he withdrew almost immediately. Fully dilated, he announced, looking up at his brother. The pup is coming now, whether we're ready or not. Then we'd better be ready. Corvus moved to kneel beside Caspian, both of them positioned to catch the baby when she emerged. Their hands moved in practiced coordination, one set supporting while the other prepared to receive. Isla felt the next contraction building like a wave, massive and unstoppable. Her wolf surged forward, lending strength to her human body, and together they pushed. The pressure was immense, the pain unlike anything she'd experienced. She heard herself screaming but couldn't stop, couldn't control anything except the desperate need to get her daughter out. Good, Corvus said, his voice cutting through her panic. Again! With the next contraction, push again. Time lost meaning. There was only the cycle of contraction and push, pain and pressure, the twins' hands guiding her daughter's descent. Isla's world narrowed to their crimson eyes, their steady voices, their unwavering presence. I can see the head, Caspian said, wonder bleeding into his tone. She has dark hair, like her mother. Corvus's hand found Isla's again, squeezing gently. One more push, maybe two. You're almost there. Isla didn't know where she found the strength. Her body was depleted, her wolf exhausted, but somehow she bore down one final time, putting everything she had left into forcing her daughter into the world. The release was sudden and absolute. Isla felt the baby slip free, felt the absence where she'd been carried for 8 months. Then, cutting through her exhausted haze, came the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. Her daughter's cry. Strong and healthy and furious at being forced from her warm home into the cold night air. Isla sobbed with relief, trying to push herself up to see, but her arms wouldn't support her weight. Caspian moved immediately, helping her into a sitting position, while Corvus cradled the tiny, wriggling pup in his large hands. She's perfect, Corvus whispered, and there was something in his voice that made Isla's breath catch. Reverence, awe, as if he was holding something infinitely precious. He began cleaning the baby with quick, efficient movements, his hands impossibly gentle despite their size. Caspian produced a soft white cloth from somewhere, and together the twins tended to the newborn with practiced ease that suggested this wasn't their first delivery. Isla watched through tears as they worked, as Corvus carefully cleared the baby's airways and Caspian tied off the cord with hands that didn't shake. Her daughter, pink and perfect and screaming her displeasure at the world, was the most beautiful thing Isla had ever seen. "May we?" Corvus asked, looking up at Isla with an expression that made her heart clench. "May you what?" Her voice came out hoarse from screaming. "Complete the prophecy." Caspian's hand moved to hover over the baby's forehead, not quite touching. "If the mark is real, it will appear now, when we both touch her at the same moment." Isla could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. She watched as both twins placed a single finger each on her daughter's tiny forehead, their movements synchronized perfectly. The world exploded into golden light. It blazed forth from the point where their fingers touched the baby's skin, so bright that Isla had to shield her eyes. She heard the elders gasp, heard the assembled pack members crying out in shock and awe. The light swirled and condensed, forming itself into a mark on her daughter's forehead, a crescent moon, surrounded by stars, glowing with divine radiance. But that wasn't all. As the light faded, Isla saw with shock that the same mark now appeared on both Corvus's and Caspian's foreheads. 3 crescents, 3 sets of stars, binding them together in a way that made Isla's wolf howl with sudden recognition. The twins stared at the baby in their hands, then at each other, their crimson eyes wide with something that looked like shock. Their hands trembled slightly, the first sign of anything less than perfect control Isla had seen from either of them. Then Corvus's gaze lifted to meet Isla's, and the intensity burning there stole her breath. Caspian's eyes followed a heartbeat later, both of them looking at her with an expression that made her feel like the ground was giving way beneath her. "Mate," Corvus breathed, the word barely audible. "Ours," Caspian finished, his voice rough with emotion, and Isla's world tilted violently as understanding crashed over her. The prophecy hadn't just marked her daughter as special. It had bound all 4 of them together in a way that could never be undone. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs as the word echoed in her mind. Mate, ours. No, that wasn't possible. She'd just been rejected by one mate. The bond with Garrett was still fraying, still bleeding pain through her chest with every breath. The goddess wouldn't be so cruel as to bind her to 2 more males before she'd even finished severing from the first. "You're wrong," she whispered, her voice shaking. "That's not... I can't..." But even as she spoke, her wolf was singing. The creature inside her that had been whimpering and broken for months suddenly surged with life, pressing against Isla's consciousness with desperate need. She could feel something forming between herself and the twins, invisible threads spinning outward from her chest toward theirs, trying to weave themselves into bonds that would be unbreakable once complete. Corvus moved first, carefully transferring the still-crying baby to Caspian's arms before shifting closer to Isla. His hand reached for her face, and she flinched back instinctively. The movement was small, but he froze immediately, his crimson eyes widening with something that looked like pain. "Don't." Isla pressed herself backward against Elder Marin's supporting hands, her breath coming in short gasps. "Don't touch me. I can't... I just..." "Breathe," Caspian said quietly, his voice gentle despite the intensity burning in his gaze. He remained where he was, holding her daughter with careful reverence, not approaching. "Just breathe, Isla. No one is going to force anything." But her body was betraying her. Despite her panic, despite her very reasonable fear, she could feel her wolf straining toward them, could smell their scent more intensely now. Pine and snow and that dark, ancient power that called to something deep in her bones. Her skin felt too tight, too hot, and she couldn't tell if it was aftermath of labor or the beginning of something she wasn't ready to name. "The bond," Elder Thessa said, her milky eyes somehow fixed on the 3 of them with uncanny accuracy. "It's trying to form. The prophecy has chosen not just the child, but her guardians, her parents." I already have a father for my child, Isla said, and hated how weak her voice sounded. She looked toward where Garrett stood at the circle's edge, his face pale and shocked. The bond with him isn't even fully severed yet. That bond was false from the beginning. Corvus's voice was quiet, but absolute. He still hadn't moved closer, still held himself carefully in check. You feel it, don't you? The difference? What you had with him was a shadow compared to what's forming now. Isla wanted to deny it, but she couldn't, because he was right. The mate bond with Garrett, even at its strongest, had never felt like this. Never made her wolf keen with need. Never made her skin ache for touch the way it did now, despite her fear. I need my daughter, she said instead, reaching out with trembling hands. Please, I need to hold her. Caspian moved immediately, crossing the small distance between them to place the tiny, squirming bundle in Isla's arms. His fingers brushed hers during the transfer, and the contact sent sparks racing up her arm. She gasped, nearly dropping the baby, but his hands were there instantly to steady them both. Easy, he murmured, his face so close to hers that she could see flecks of darker red in his crimson eyes. We've got you. Both of you. Isla clutched her daughter to her chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her skin, and finally allowed herself to look down at the life she'd created. The baby had stopped crying, her perfect rosebud mouth working as she rooted instinctively for food. Dark hair, just as Caspian had said, crowned her tiny head, and on her forehead the mark glowed softly, a crescent moon surrounded by stars that pulsed with each small breath. She's beautiful, Corvus said, and his voice held such raw emotion that Isla's eyes burned with fresh tears. What will you name her? Aurora. The name came to Isla without thought, feeling right in a way few things had recently. Her name is Aurora. Aurora, Caspian repeated, testing the sound. A smile curved his lips, transforming his harsh features into something that made Isla's breath catch. It suits her. Light in the darkness. The mark on Aurora's forehead pulsed brighter at the sound of her name, and Isla watched in fascination as the matching marks on the twins' foreheads responded in kind. The three crescents glowed in perfect synchronization, like hearts beating as one. This isn't real, Isla whispered, even as part of her recognized the lie. This is just the prophecy, the magic. It's not actually a mate bond. Tell that to your wolf. Corvus's voice was gentle but unyielding. Tell her she's wrong about what she feels. Isla's wolf snarled in response, pushing forward so aggressively that Isla felt her eyes flash. The creature wanted out. Wanted to shift and run to these males and claim what the prophecy had apparently decided was theirs. The strength of the desire terrified her. I can't do this, she said, and Aurora stirred in her arms, responding to her mother's distress with a small whimper. Isla immediately tried to calm herself, rocking gently, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. I just went through rejection. My bond with Garrett is still breaking. I'm not ready to. Then we wait. Caspian's hand moved to rest on the furs beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. No one is asking you to complete any bonds tonight, Isla. You've been through trauma. You need time to heal. But the prophecy, Elder Thessa interjected, her voice worried. The marks have appeared. The bonds are trying to form. If they're not completed within the moon cycle, they could fracture. The child could be left unprotected. Panic spiked through Isla's chest. What does that mean? Unprotected from what? There are forces that will want to use Aurora, Corvus said, his expression hardening into something dangerous. The moment that mark appeared, she became the most valuable child in all the territories. Wolves will come, some wanting to pledge loyalty to the prophesied one, others wanting to control her, to use her power for their own purposes, which is why the prophecy bound her to us. Caspian's crimson eyes held Isla's steadily. We're not just her fathers by magic, Isla. We're her protectors. No one in the territories is strong enough to challenge us, not even together. Aurora will be safe with us. And I'm just supposed to accept that? Isla's voice cracked. Supposed to let you take my daughter away to your territory? Trust two males I just met? No! Corvus shook his head, and something vulnerable crossed his face. You're supposed to come with us. You and Aurora both. You'd be under our protection, in our home, safe from anyone who'd want to hurt you because of what your daughter represents. The offer was tempting, terrifyingly so, but Isla's mind kept circling back to one undeniable fact. These were the Blood Emperors, legends, creatures of immense power who ruled the northern territories with absolute authority. What could they possibly want with a broken she-wolf and her newborn pup? Why? The question burst from her before she could stop it. Why would the prophecy choose you? You're unmated. You've been unmated for decades. Everyone knows the Blood Emperors have no interest in taking a mate. Something passed between the twins, a look so loaded with meaning that Isla felt like an intruder witnessing it. Then Corvus turned back to her, and his expression was more open than she'd seen it. We've been waiting, he said quietly. For 35 years, we've been waiting for the one the prophecy promised us. The one who would bear the child that would change everything. We turned down countless offers, rejected every female presented to us because we knew. Somewhere out there was our true mate, the one meant for both of us. And you think that's me? Isla's laugh was bitter. I'm nothing special. I'm just a low-ranking she-wolf whose own mate found her so lacking that he chose her sister instead. There's nothing about me that screams destiny. You're wrong. Caspian's voice was fierce. You survived betrayal that would have broken most wolves. You carried a child through a deteriorating bond, which should have killed you both. You endured a rejection ceremony while in labor and still brought Aurora safely into this world. You're stronger than you know, Isla. I'm broken, she countered, tears streaming down her face. Aurora stirred against her chest, making small, distressed sounds at the salt that dripped onto her perfect skin. Can't you see that? I'm shattered into so many pieces I don't even know how to put myself back together. Then let us help. Corvus finally moved closer, slowly, telegraphing every shift so she could pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. His touch was electric, sending warmth flooding through her body. Let us protect you while you heal. Let us prove that the goddess didn't make a mistake. Isla wanted to believe him. Goddess. How she wanted to believe that she could be wanted, that she could be chosen, that she could be enough for someone. But the wounds Garrett had left were too fresh, too raw. What about him? She looked toward where Garrett still stood, his green eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. The bond isn't fully broken. He's Aurora's biological father. Doesn't he have rights? The temperature dropped so quickly that Isla's breath misted in the air. Both twins turned as one to face Garrett, and the power that rolled off them made every wolf in the circle drop to their knees in submission. Even the elders bowed their heads, unable to withstand the force of the Blood Emperor's displeasure. He has no rights. Corvus's voice was death itself. He rejected you while you carried his child, questioned Aurora's paternity, chose another female over his pregnant mate. The only reason he still breathes is because killing him would upset you. And that restraint is rapidly fading, Caspian added, his tone matching his brother's in lethal promise. His hand moved to rest on Isla's shoulder, protective and possessive. The bond you had with him is severed as of this moment. We're completing the rejection on your behalf. You can't just, Garrett started, finally finding his voice. We can, Corvus interrupted. We're the Blood Emperors. We can do whatever we wish. And what we wish is for you to accept Isla's rejection and remove yourself from her presence before we forget our restraint. The bond with Garrett, already frayed to nearly nothing, suddenly snapped. Isla gasped at the sensation, the final thread breaking cleanly instead of the slow unraveling she'd been enduring. The pain was sharp, but brief, and then nothing. Just emptiness where Garrett had lived in her heart for 2 years. She should have felt grief, loss, something. But all she felt was relief. It's done, Elder Thessa said quietly, her milky eyes somehow tracking the severing of the bond. Garrett Blackwood, you have no further claim on Isla or her daughter. The rejection is complete. Garrett's face had gone white. He stared at Isla as if seeing her for the first time, and something like regret flickered in his eyes. Isla, I don't. Her voice was stronger now, steadier. She held Aurora closer, feeling her daughter's warmth against her chest. You made your choice, Garrett. You chose Lydia. You chose to reject me in front of the entire pack. You don't get to take it back now just because my daughter turned out to be prophesied. That's not... He took a step forward, but Corvus moved to block him, his body a wall between Garrett and Isla. She told you not to speak, Corvus said, his voice soft and infinitely dangerous. Are you really foolish enough to ignore that command? Garrett wisely remained silent, but his eyes stayed on Isla, pleading without words for something she no longer had to give. Caspian's hand moved from Isla's shoulder to gently tuck a strand of sweat-dampened hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, intimate, and it made Isla's already racing heart skip several beats. We should move you somewhere more comfortable, he said quietly. You need to rest, to recover, and Aurora needs to feed. The mention of feeding made Isla acutely aware of the ache in her breasts, her body responding to her daughter's needs even through her emotional turmoil. She looked down at Aurora, at the tiny face scrunched in displeasure, and felt something fierce bloom in her chest. This was her daughter, hers. Prophecy or not, mate bonds or not, Aurora was the one thing in this disaster that was purely, completely hers. Where would we go? She asked quietly, not quite agreeing, but not refusing either. Our territory. Corvus gestured toward the forest edge where two massive carriages waited, dark wood inlaid with silver that caught the moonlight. It's 3 days' travel by normal means, but our horses are faster. We can be there by dawn. 3 days condensed to hours. The casual display of power should have frightened her. Instead, Isla found herself thinking about soft beds and privacy, and not having to see the pity in her packmate's eyes. If I go, she said slowly, watching both twins carefully. What happens to me? To Aurora? What exactly are you expecting? Nothing you're not ready to give, Caspian answered immediately. You'd have your own suite of rooms, complete privacy, healers to check on you and Aurora, everything you need to recover from the birth and the rejection. And the mate bond? Isla forced herself to ask. The one that's apparently trying to form? The twins exchanged another loaded look. Then Corvus spoke, his voice careful. We won't push it. The bond will form at its own pace as you're ready. Some bonds take years to complete. We can wait. But what if I'm never ready? The question came out small, vulnerable. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken to ever... Then we wait forever, Caspian said simply, and the certainty in his voice made Isla's throat tight. You and Aurora are ours to protect regardless of whether the mate bond ever completes. That's not conditional, Isla. That's absolute. Aurora chose that moment to voice her displeasure more loudly, her tiny face turning red as she wailed. Isla immediately tried to soothe her, but her daughter was having none of it. The baby wanted food, and she wanted it now. We need privacy, Isla said, looking around at the assembled pack members who were still watching avidly despite the late hour. I can't. Not in front of everyone. Both twins moved immediately. Corvus stood and shed his long coat, holding it out to create a privacy screen. Caspian positioned himself on her other side, his broad back blocking the view from that direction. Together, they formed a protective barrier around Isla and Aurora, shutting out the watching eyes. Better? Corvus asked softly. Isla nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Her hands shook as she adjusted her ruined dress, trying to expose enough skin for Aurora to latch without exposing herself completely. The twins kept their eyes carefully averted, giving her what privacy they could in the impossible situation. Aurora latched with surprising strength for such a tiny thing, and Isla felt her whole body relax as her daughter began to nurse. This, at least, was natural. Right. Something she knew how to do, even if everything else in her life had turned upside down. "We need your answer, Isla," Elder Thessa said from beyond the twins' protective barrier. "Will you go with the Blood Emperors, or will you return to Silver Ridge Pack?" Isla looked up at Corvus and Caspian, at these legendary creatures who claimed she was their mate, who had delivered her daughter with gentle hands and fierce protection, who were offering her safety and time to heal and asking for nothing in return. Then she looked past them, toward where her pack still knelt in submission, toward Garrett and Lydia, toward the wolves who'd watched her be rejected without a single voice raised in protest. She'd never belonged here. Not really. She'd just been too desperate to be chosen to see it. "I'll go with them," she said quietly, and watched something fierce and triumphant blaze in the twins' crimson eyes. "But I'm not promising anything beyond that. I need time. I need space. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by someone else's rejection." "Then that's what you'll have," Corvus said, and he offered her his hand. Isla stared at it for a long moment. This was it. The moment where everything changed. Where she stopped being Garrett's rejected mate and became something else. Something unknown and terrifying, and maybe, possibly, something better. She reached out and placed her hand in his, feeling his fingers close around hers with careful strength. And together, they rose. Corvus helped Isla to her feet with careful strength, his hand steady beneath her elbow as her legs threatened to buckle. Her body felt hollowed out, emptied, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Only his support and Caspian's hand at her back kept her upright. Aurora had finished nursing and now lay content in Isla's arms, her tiny eyes closed, the mark on her forehead pulsing softly with each breath. The golden light had faded to a gentle glow, but Isla could still feel the power emanating from her daughter, could feel the way it hummed in response to the twins' presence. "Can you walk?" Caspian asked quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Isla wanted to say yes, wanted to prove she wasn't completely helpless. But the moment she tried to take a step, pain shot through her lower body, sharp enough to make her gasp. Her knees gave out. Both twins caught her immediately, their hands firm but gentle as they kept her from falling. Corvus cursed under his breath, the sound harsh in the quiet night. "The birth was too fast. The tearing is worse than I thought." "I'm fine," Isla protested weakly, even as another wave of pain washed through her. "Just give me a minute." "You're not fine." Caspian's voice was gentle but implacable. "And we're not going to make you walk when you can barely stand." He looked at his brother over Isla's head. "I'll carry her. You take Aurora." Before Isla could protest, Corvus was carefully extracting Aurora from her arms. She wanted to refuse, wanted to keep her daughter close, but the way he cradled the tiny pup with such reverence stopped her objections. He held Aurora like she was made of spun glass, precious and fragile and infinitely valuable. Then Caspian was lifting Isla into his arms, one hand beneath her knees and the other supporting her back. She made a small sound of surprise, her hands instinctively gripping his shoulders for balance. He was warm, his body radiating heat that seeped into her chilled skin, and his scent surrounded her completely. Pine and snow and that dark ancient power that made her wolf purr with contentment. "I can walk," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You can let us help." Caspian's crimson eyes met hers, and something in his gaze made her throat tight. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Isla. You don't have to do everything alone anymore." The words hit harder than they should have. For months, she'd had no choice but to be strong, to endure Garrett's growing distance and public doubts, to face the pack's pitying looks, to prepare for single motherhood while her mate courted her sister. She'd built walls around herself brick by brick, each one necessary for survival, but here, in Caspian's arms, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her, something in those walls cracked. She didn't respond, couldn't. She just nodded and let her head rest against his shoulder, breathing in his scent and trying not to think about how right it felt to be held by him. The twins moved in perfect synchronization, walking toward the waiting carriages with fluid grace. The assembled pack parted before them, wolves dropping their gazes in submission as the blood emperors passed. Isla felt their stares, heard whispers starting already about what had happened, what it meant. The rejected she-wolf, claimed by the legendary blood emperors. The prophesied child, marked by the goddess herself. It would be the only thing anyone talked about for months. Isla. Garrett's voice cut through the whispers, desperate and raw. Caspian didn't stop walking, didn't even slow. But Isla turned her head enough to see Garrett pushing through the crowd, Lydia's hand on his arm, trying to hold him back. "Please," Garrett called out. "Can we just talk? Can I just—" "You had months to talk to her," Corvus said without looking back, his voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. "You chose silence. You chose doubt. You chose another female. You don't get to ask for her time now." "Aurora is my daughter," Garrett insisted, and Isla heard the edge of panic in his voice. "I have a right to know her, to be part of her life." That made Caspian stop. He turned slowly, his crimson eyes finding Garrett in the crowd. When he spoke, his voice was soft. But it carried a weight that made every wolf present shudder. "You questioned her paternity for months. You made Isla doubt herself, doubt her worth, while she carried your child. You rejected her publicly while she was pregnant. You have no rights." The finality in those words was absolute. Isla saw Garrett flinch, saw genuine pain cross his features. Part of her, the part that had loved him for 2 years, wanted to protest, wanted to say he deserved a chance to know his daughter. But a larger part, the part that had endured his rejection, his doubts, his casual cruelty, stayed silent. "Let's go," she whispered to Caspian. "Please, I just want to leave." Caspian resumed walking immediately, holding her closer to his chest. Corvus matched his pace, Aurora still sleeping peacefully in his arms, despite the tension crackling through the air. They reached the first carriage, and Isla could see now that it wasn't a normal vehicle. The wood was dark as midnight, inlaid with silver runes that pulsed with faint light. The horses hitched to it were massive, easily twice the size of normal horses, with coats of pure black that seemed to absorb the moonlight. A servant appeared, opening the carriage door to reveal an interior that made Isla's breath catch. Plush velvet seats in deep crimson, silk curtains, enchanted lanterns that cast warm light across surfaces polished to a mirror shine. It was luxury beyond anything she'd ever experienced in Silver Ridge Pack. Caspian carried her inside, settling her carefully on one of the seats. The cushions were so soft she sank into them immediately, her exhausted body sighing with relief. Corvus followed, positioning himself across from her with Aurora still cradled protectively against his chest. "We'll need to check your injuries," Caspian said, his hand moving to rest on her knee. The touch was innocent, clinical, but Isla still felt heat flood through her at the contact. "Once we're moving, the carriage has privacy enchantments. No one will be able to see or hear inside." "Check my injuries?" Isla's voice came out higher than intended. "The tearing from the birth." Corvus's expression was serious, concerned. "You're bleeding more than you should be. We need to assess the damage and heal what we can." The thought of either of them examining her so intimately made Isla's face burn. They'd just delivered her baby, had seen everything already, but somehow the idea of them tending to her injuries in the close confines of the carriage felt infinitely more vulnerable. "I can wait until we reach your territory," she said quickly. "Until there's a healer, a female healer." "You'll bleed out before we get there." Caspian's voice was gentle but firm. "I know it's uncomfortable, but we're not going to let you suffer when we can help." The carriage lurched into motion before Isla could respond, the movement so smooth she barely felt it despite the speed she could hear building outside. Through the window she watched Silver Ridge territory begin to blur past, trees and familiar landmarks disappearing into darkness. She was leaving. Actually leaving the only home she'd ever known, with 2 males she'd met less than an hour ago, because of a prophecy she didn't fully understand. What was she doing? Breathe, Corvus said quietly, and Isla realized she was hyperventilating, her chest rising and falling too rapidly. You're safe. We're not going to hurt you. I don't know you, she whispered, the panic finally breaking through. I don't know anything about you except stories, legends. You could be taking me anywhere. You could be planning anything. We could, Caspian agreed, and his honesty was somehow more comforting than false reassurances would have been. But we're not. Look at me, Isla. She forced her eyes to meet his, seeing her reflection in those crimson depths. She looked wild, disheveled, terrified. Your wolf knows, he said softly. She recognized us the moment we arrived. She's not afraid. Trust her instincts if you can't trust us yet. Isla reached inside herself, touching the consciousness of her wolf. The creature was calm, content in a way she hadn't been in months. She trusted the twins completely, absolutely, in the way only animals could trust. Without doubt, without question. She wants me to accept the bond, Isla said, her voice breaking. Right now. She doesn't understand why I'm resisting. Because you're human as well as wolf. Corvus shifted Aurora carefully, supporting her tiny head with one large hand. The human part needs time, needs to understand and process and heal. We're not asking you to ignore that part of yourself. A sharp cramp twisted through Isla's lower abdomen, making her gasp. Her hand flew to her stomach, feeling the hardness there that suggested her body was trying to expel the afterbirth. But something felt wrong. The pain was too sharp, too focused. Caspian was moving immediately, his hands gentle but efficient, as he helped her lie back on the seat. The placenta hasn't fully detached, he said, his expression tightening with concern. That's what's causing the excessive bleeding. What does that mean? Fear spiked through Isla's chest. Is that dangerous? It can be. Corvus's voice was calm, but she could see the worry in his eyes as he looked at his brother. If it's not removed, she could hemorrhage. Then we remove it. Caspian's hands moved to the hem of Isla's ruined dress. I need to examine you, need to see how much is still attached. This is going to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable seemed like a massive understatement. Isla's hands clenched into fists as Caspian pushed her dress up, exposing her to his clinical gaze. She turned her face away, her cheeks burning with humiliation despite the necessity. His fingers were cool and gentle as they probed, but the pain that followed made her cry out. She felt him working, felt pressure and discomfort, and the horrible sensation of something being pulled from inside her body. Almost done, Caspian murmured, his voice tight with concentration. Just hold on a little longer. Isla bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, trying to stay still, trying not to scream. Corvus shifted Aurora to one arm and reached out with his free hand, finding Isla's and lacing their fingers together. The contact anchored her, gave her something to focus on besides the pain. There, Caspian's voice carried relief. It's out, all of it. The pressure released suddenly, and Isla felt a rush of warm blood. Too much blood. She could smell it. Metallic and strong. Could feel it soaking into the seat beneath her. The bleeding isn't stopping. Corvus's voice held an edge of panic she hadn't heard before. Her body isn't contracting properly. Caspian's hands moved to Isla's abdomen, pressing down firmly in a way that made her gasp. Come on, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Contract. Your body knows what to do. Contract. But Isla could feel her consciousness starting to fade at the edges, gray creeping into her vision. She'd lost too much blood. Between the birth and the complications and now this, her body had simply been pushed too far. Isla, stay with me. Corvus's face filled her dimming vision, his crimson eyes bright with fear. Don't you dare leave us. Not now, not after we just found you. She wanted to tell him she wasn't trying to leave, that she didn't have a choice, that her body was giving up despite her mind's protests, but the words wouldn't form, her tongue too heavy in her mouth. Then she felt it. Heat, pouring from where Caspian's hands pressed against her abdomen, flooding through her body in waves. It burned, but not painfully, more like coming in from freezing cold to sit beside a fire, like life itself being poured back into her veins. "That's it," Caspian said, and his voice sounded strained, exhausted. "Take what you need. Take all of it." Isla's vision cleared slightly, and she could see now that both twins were glowing. Faint crimson light emanated from their skin, pulsing in time with their heartbeats. They were healing her, pouring their own life force into her body to stop the bleeding, to give her strength. The mark on Aurora's forehead suddenly blazed bright, responding to her father's magic. The baby didn't wake, but golden light joined the crimson, swirling together in patterns that seemed to dance across the carriage interior. Isla felt her body respond, felt her womb finally contracting the way it should have from the beginning, felt the bleeding slow, then stop, felt strength returning to limbs that had been limp with blood loss. "Is she—" Corvus's voice was rough with emotion. "She's stabilizing." Caspian's hands remained on Isla's abdomen, the crimson glow fading slowly. "But she needs rest, real rest, and blood replenishment that we can't provide in a moving carriage." "We're 2 hours from the Obsidian Palace," Corvus said, his hand still holding Isla's tightly. "Can she make it that long?" "She'll have to." Caspian's eyes met Isla's, and she saw exhaustion there that matched her own. "Stay awake, Isla. I know you're tired. I know you want to sleep. But you need to stay awake until we can get you to proper healers." Isla wanted to argue, wanted to say she was fine, that she could sleep now, but she could see the genuine fear in both twins' eyes, could feel through the forming bond how terrified they'd been at the thought of losing her. "Tell me about your territory," she whispered, forcing her heavy eyelids to stay open. "Distract me, please." Corvus's expression softened with understanding. He adjusted his hold on Aurora, settling more comfortably in his seat, while keeping his other hand linked with Isla's. "The Obsidian Palace is carved into the side of a mountain," he began, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence. "Black stone that gleams like glass under the sun. It was built 300 years ago by our great-grandfather, when the territories were still at war." "It has 1,000 rooms," Caspian added, his hands moving to gently clean the blood from Isla's skin, with a cloth that appeared from somewhere in the carriage. His touch was clinical but tender. "Gardens that bloom year-round despite the northern cold, libraries that hold texts from before the first wolves walked the earth. Hot springs that flow through the mountain itself," Corvus continued, picking up the thread seamlessly. "Heated by volcanic activity deep underground, the water is said to have healing properties." Isla listened to them describe their home, their voices washing over her like a soothing river. She focused on staying conscious, on breathing, on the feeling of Corvus's hand in hers, and Caspian's gentle ministrations. Aurora slept through it all, peaceful and content in her father's arms, her mark glowing softly in the darkness. And Isla wondered, as the carriage carried them through the night toward an unknown future, if the goddess had planned this all along, if her rejection had been necessary to bring her here. To these males who delivered her daughter with gentle hands and were now fighting desperately to keep Isla alive. If breaking had been the only way to be rebuilt into something stronger, the thought should have comforted her. Instead, it just made her more aware of how much she'd lost, how much she still stood to lose if she couldn't figure out how to trust again. "Stay with us," Caspian whispered, his hand moving to cup her face. "Just a little longer. We're almost home." Home. The word felt foreign, impossible, but as Isla looked between the twins at the fierce protectiveness in their crimson eyes, she found herself wanting to believe it might be true. The carriage swayed gently as it climbed what Isla assumed was a mountain road, the angle shifting beneath her. Her body ached in places she hadn't known could ache, every muscle protesting the trauma of the last few hours. But she was alive, conscious, and strangely, despite everything, she felt safer than she had in months. Caspian had finished cleaning the blood from her skin, and someone had draped a soft blanket over her lower body, preserving what modesty could be salvaged. His hands now rested on her ankles, his thumbs tracing small circles against her skin in a gesture she suspected was meant to be soothing. It was working, despite her best efforts to remain distant. "Why were you waiting?" The question escaped before Isla could stop it. She immediately wished she could take it back, but Corvus's crimson eyes had already found hers, curious and cautious. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly, shifting Aurora slightly in his arms. The baby had started to stir, making small sounds that suggested she'd wake soon and demand to be fed again. "You said you've been waiting 35 years. For the prophecy. For—" Isla couldn't make herself say, "for me." It felt too presumptuous, too impossible. For whoever was supposed to bear the prophesied child. But that's your whole lives. You've never taken mates, never had families. Why would you do that based on some old prophecy that might not even be real?" The twins exchanged one of those loaded looks that made Isla feel like an outsider witnessing a private conversation. Then Caspian's hand stilled on her ankles, his expression growing distant. "Because we didn't have a choice," he said quietly. "The prophecy wasn't just a prediction, Isla. It was a curse. Or a blessing, depending on how you look at it." "I don't understand." Isla pushed herself up slightly, ignoring the way her body protested the movement. "How can a prophecy force you to do anything?" Corvus looked down at Aurora, his expression softening as he watched her tiny face scrunch in sleep. "When we were born, our mother knew immediately that something was different about us. Twin alphas are rare enough, but twin alphas with the old blood, the blood that gives us power beyond normal wolves, that's almost unheard of. She took us to a seer," Caspian continued, picking up the thread seamlessly. "An ancient wolf who could read fates in the stars. The seer told her that we would rule the northern territories with unmatched power, that our reign would bring prosperity and peace." "That sounds like a blessing," Isla said carefully, watching the shadows move across both their faces. "It would have been." Corvus's voice went hard. "If that had been the entire prophecy. But the seer also said that we would never know true happiness until we found our shared mate. The one female meant for both of us. The one who would bear the child that would unite all the territories." Isla's breath caught. "Shared mate? You mean, you're meant for both of us," Caspian said. And there was no apology in his tone, just simple fact. Not just one, both. The prophecy was clear. We would search for decades, reject countless suitable females, endure whispers that we were unnatural, wrong, but we would wait, because attempting to bond with anyone else would only bring misery to all involved. We tried to fight it at first. Corvus's laugh was bitter. "When we were younger, we thought we could outsmart fate. I courted a female from the Eastern Territories, beautiful, strong, from a powerful bloodline. Everything an alpha should want in a mate." "What happened?" Isla asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "The bond wouldn't form." Corvus's eyes met hers, and she saw old pain there. "No matter how much I wanted it to, no matter how perfect she seemed, my wolf rejected her completely. Wouldn't even consider marking her." "Mine too," Caspian added. "I tried with a different female a year later. Same result. It was like our wolves knew. They were waiting for you, even when we didn't understand yet." "So you've been alone this whole time." Isla's voice came out smaller than she intended. "For 35 years, because of a prophecy about someone you'd never met." "Not alone." Corvus's gaze dropped back to Aurora, and something tender crossed his face. "We had each other, and we had our kingdom to build, our people to protect. It wasn't the life we might have chosen, but it was ours. Until tonight," Caspian said, his hands resuming their gentle circles on Isla's ankles. "Until we felt the call. The moment your labor began, we knew. Both of us. We were training in the combat yards when it hit. This overwhelming need to run, to get to you. We didn't even know where you were, but our wolves knew the direction." We shifted and ran faster than we've ever run. Corvus's voice held wonder now, replacing the bitterness. The entire kingdom probably thinks we've lost our minds. We didn't explain, didn't give orders. We just left everything and ran toward you. Isla absorbed this, trying to process what they were telling her. They'd abandoned their entire kingdom, their responsibilities, their duties, because they'd felt her distress, because the prophecy had driven them to her side, whether they wanted to come or not. What if I can't be what you need? The question burst from her, raw and terrified. What if the prophecy is wrong and I'm just me? Just a broken she-wolf who couldn't even keep her first mate interested. What happens then? Then we figure it out together. Caspian's voice was firm. The prophecy brought us to you, Isla. But that's all it did. What happens next, whether the mate bond completes, whether you can ever trust us, that's up to you. Not fate, not destiny. You. But the mark on Aurora, Isla protested, looking at her sleeping daughter. The way it appeared on all of you. That's not choice. That's magic binding us together whether we want it or not. The mark confirms Aurora's destiny, Corvus corrected gently, and it confirms that we're meant to protect her, to raise her. But your bond with us, that's separate. That requires your acceptance, your willingness to let us in. Aurora chose that moment to wake, her tiny face scrunching before she let out a wail that filled the carriage. Isla felt her body respond immediately, her breasts aching with the need to feed her daughter. Corvus stood smoothly, despite the moving carriage, crossing the small space to place Aurora carefully in Isla's arms. His fingers brushed hers during the transfer, and that now familiar spark raced up her arm. She saw him feel it too, saw his eyes flash brighter crimson before he stepped back. "We'll give you privacy," Caspian said, already moving to join his brother on the opposite seat. They both turned their backs, giving her space to nurse Aurora without their eyes on her. The gesture was small, but it made Isla's throat tight. They could have watched. They'd already seen everything during the delivery. But they were trying to give her dignity, control, choice. Aurora latched hungrily, and Isla felt herself relax into the familiar rhythm. This she understood. This was simple and right, and had nothing to do with prophecies or mate bonds or complicated feelings she wasn't ready to examine. "Can I ask you something?" Corvus's voice came from across the carriage, his back still turned. "Yes," Isla said quietly. "What did he do?" The question was careful, controlled. "Garrett, what did he do to make you believe you're broken?" Isla's first instinct was to say nothing, to claim she was fine, that the rejection hadn't actually damaged her. But something about the darkness of the carriage, the way they weren't looking at her, made the truth easier to speak. "It started small," she heard herself say. "Little comments about my rank, my bloodline, how I wasn't as strong as other she-wolves, how I should be grateful he'd chosen me despite my inadequacies." She felt both twins tense, though neither turned around or interrupted. "Then I got pregnant, and instead of being happy, he started questioning whether the baby was even his. He said I must have been with someone else because he couldn't believe his child would be so weak that I couldn't shift while carrying it." Caspian made a sound low in his throat, almost a growl. "He started courting my sister openly," Isla continued, the words coming faster now. "Taking her to pack functions instead of me. Telling people he'd made a mistake, that the bond with me had been false, that once the baby was born, he'd reject me properly and take Lydia as his true mate." "But he waited," Corvus said, his voice deadly quiet. "He waited until you were 8 months pregnant and vulnerable to perform the rejection ceremony. He said it would be better that way." Isla blinked back tears, refusing to let them fall. "That ending it cleanly before Aurora was born would save everyone pain in the long run, that I could raise her alone and he'd take Lydia and it would all work out. He's fortunate we only threatened him," Caspian said, and there was such cold fury in his tone that Isla shivered. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't needed us focused on you, we would have torn him apart for what he put you through." "He's not worth your anger," Isla said, though the defensive words felt hollow even to her own ears. Maybe not. Corvus finally turned, his crimson eyes finding hers across the carriage. But you are worth ours. You're worth every bit of rage we feel at how you were treated. Something in Isla's chest cracked at those words. For months, she'd convinced herself that she'd deserved Garrett's treatment somehow. That if she'd just been stronger, prettier, better, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere. But the fierce protectiveness in the twins' eyes suggested a different truth. Maybe she hadn't been the problem. Maybe Garrett had. I don't know how to let you in, she admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know how to trust that you won't decide I'm not enough either, that you won't wake up one day and realize the prophecy made a mistake. Then we prove it. Caspian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression intense. Every day, for as long as it takes, we prove that you're not just enough. You're everything. We're not asking for your trust immediately, Corvus added. We're asking for a chance to earn it. Time to show you that not all mates are like Garrett. That you deserve to be cherished, protected, chosen every single day. Aurora finished nursing and made a small sound of contentment. Isla adjusted her clothing and lifted her daughter to her shoulder, gently patting her back. The baby's mark glowed softly in the darkness, responding to the emotional intensity in the carriage. What if I can never complete the bond? Isla asked. What if I'm too damaged? What if Aurora grows up with parents who are connected by prophecy but not by choice? Then she grows up knowing her mother was strong enough to protect her own heart, Caspian said simply, and her fathers respected that strength. There are worse things than an incomplete mate bond. Like what? Isla couldn't imagine anything worse. Like forcing a bond that shouldn't exist, Corvus answered. Like your mother being with someone who made her feel small and worthless. Like watching her father question her worth daily. His eyes dropped to Aurora. We won't do that to her, or to you. Whatever happens between us, whatever you choose, you'll both be valued, protected, chosen. The carriage began to slow, the angle of ascent leveling out. Through the window, Isla could see lights, dozens of them, glowing in the darkness. Buildings, a city, and beyond them, carved into the mountain itself, a palace of black stone that seemed to drink in the moonlight. We're here, Caspian said, and Isla heard both relief and tension in his voice. The healers are waiting. They'll check you and Aurora thoroughly, make sure there's no lingering damage from the birth or the bleeding. Isla clutched Aurora closer, her heart starting to race. This was it. The moment she stepped into their territory, into their home, everything would become more real, more permanent. What if I want to leave? She asked suddenly. Later, after I've healed, what if I decide this isn't where I belong? Both twins looked at her with identical expressions of pain, but Corvus was the one who answered. Then we'll help you go. We won't hold you prisoner, Isla. You're not our captive. You're our mate. And if you choose to reject us, to raise Aurora elsewhere, we'll respect that choice. But we'll never stop protecting you, Caspian added. Distance won't change that. Rejection won't change that. You and Aurora are ours to protect whether you accept the bond or not. The carriage stopped completely. Isla heard voices outside, heard movement and preparation. The door would open any moment, and she'd have to face whatever came next. I'm scared, she whispered, and admitting it felt like exposing her throat to predators. We know. Corvus stood, still cradling Aurora with careful tenderness. But you don't have to be brave right now. Let us be brave for you. The door opened, revealing a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She wore robes that marked her as a healer, and her gaze went immediately to Isla with professional assessment. My lords, she said, bowing slightly to the twins. And welcome, Lady Isla. I'm Healer Maris. We have rooms prepared. Let's get you comfortable and assess any damage. Caspian was already lifting Isla into his arms again, moving with fluid grace out of the carriage. The night air was cooler here, crisper, scented with pine and something clean that might have been snow. Isla could see pack members gathered, all of them dropping to their knees as the Blood Emperors passed with their newfound mate and prophesied child. The attention made her want to hide, but Caspian's arms were steady around her, and Corvus walked beside them with Aurora, and somehow their presence made the scrutiny bearable. "You're going to be fine," Caspian murmured against her ear as they climbed stairs that seemed to go on forever. "We've got you." And despite everything, despite all her fear and doubt and broken pieces, Isla found herself wanting to believe him. The stairs seemed endless, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the obsidian palace. Isla's exhausted mind tried to catalog details: walls of polished black stone that caught the light from enchanted sconces, tapestries depicting wolves running beneath crimson moons, the scent of something sweet and herbal that must have been incense burning somewhere nearby. But mostly she was aware of Caspian's arms around her, solid and warm, of Corvus walking beside them with Aurora, murmuring softly to the baby even though she'd fallen back asleep, of healer Maris leading them through corridors that branched and twisted like the inside of a mountain should. Finally, they stopped before a set of double doors carved with intricate patterns of stars and moons. Maris pushed them open, revealing a suite of rooms that made Isla's breath catch despite her exhaustion. The main chamber was enormous, easily 5 times the size of the small house she'd lived in at Silver Ridge. A massive bed dominated one wall, its dark wood posts carved with protective runes that glowed faintly. Plush rugs covered the stone floor, and a fireplace already crackled with welcoming warmth. But what caught her attention was the smaller room visible through an archway, a nursery, complete with a cradle that looked hand-carved by master craftsmen, its surface decorated with the same protective runes as the bed. Soft blankets in shades of cream and gold. A changing table. Everything a newborn could possibly need. "You prepared all this?" Isla's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Before you even knew if the prophecy was real? We've been preparing for 35 years, Corvus said quietly, moving toward the nursery to lay Aurora in the cradle. The baby settled immediately, her tiny fist curling beside her face. "We always believed you'd come, that our mate would arrive exactly when she was meant to." Caspian carried Isla to the bed, setting her down with careful gentleness. The mattress was so soft she sank into it immediately, her body sighing with relief after hours of discomfort. He stepped back quickly, as if afraid his proximity might overwhelm her. Healer Maris moved forward with brisk efficiency, her hands already glowing with soft green healing light. "I need to examine you thoroughly," she said, her tone kind but firm. "Check the tearing, make sure the bleeding has fully stopped, assess whether there's any infection starting." Isla's face burned. Having the twins deliver Aurora had been necessary, survival overriding modesty. But this felt different, more clinical, more real. "Would you prefer if we left?" Corvus asked, reading her discomfort with unsettling accuracy. His crimson eyes held understanding, not judgment. Part of Isla wanted to say yes, wanted privacy for this final humiliation. But another part, the part that was starting to recognize the forming mate bond, wanted them close, wanted their steadying presence even if she couldn't yet admit why. "Stay," she heard herself say. "But maybe, don't look?" Both twins turned immediately, moving to stand by the windows that overlooked the kingdom below. Their backs were rigid, hands clasped behind them in identical poses that would have been endearing if Isla's situation weren't so mortifying. Maris helped Isla remove what remained of her ruined dress, replacing it with a soft nightgown that felt like silk against her skin. Then, the examination began. The healer's hands were gentle but thorough, her healing magic warm as it flowed through Isla's damaged tissues. "The tearing is healing well," Maris murmured, more to herself than to Isla. "The Blood Emperors did good work stopping the hemorrhage. Without their intervention, you would have bled out within the hour." Isla's eyes flew to the twins' backs, seeing the tension in their shoulders. They'd saved her life. Again. First by arriving to deliver Aurora when no one else could, then by pouring their own life force into her failing body. She owed them everything, and that terrified her almost as much as the forming mate bond. There's some residual damage, Maris continued, her hands moving lower. Nothing that won't heal with time and proper care, but you'll need to avoid strenuous activity for at least a week. No shifting, no running, preferably no walking unless absolutely necessary. I understand, Isla said quietly, though the idea of being bedridden while her daughter needed her made anxiety spike in her chest. The baby will be brought to you whenever she needs to feed, Maris said, as if reading Isla's thoughts. And there will be servants to help with everything else. Your only job right now is to heal. The healer's magic intensified, and Isla felt warmth spreading through her lower body, knitting torn tissues back together, encouraging her exhausted system to repair itself faster than normal. It didn't hurt exactly, but the sensation was strange, intimate in a way that made her deeply uncomfortable. All done. Maris stepped back, the green glow fading from her hands. You'll be tender for several days, but the worst is over. I'll leave healing salves and pain drafts on the table. Use them as needed. Thank you, Isla managed, pulling the nightgown down to cover herself properly. Maris bowed slightly, then moved toward the nursery to check on Aurora. The twins remained by the window, still giving Isla privacy, even though the examination was complete. You can turn around now, Isla said, her voice small. They turned in perfect unison, and the relief on both their faces was palpable. Corvus moved first, crossing to sit carefully on the edge of the bed. Close enough to reach, but not touching. How do you feel? He asked, his crimson eyes searching her face for signs of pain or distress. Exhausted, Isla admitted. Sore, overwhelmed, confused. She looked between them, these powerful males who'd upended her entire life in the span of a few hours. I don't understand why you care so much. The prophecy explains Aurora, but not this. She gestured vaguely at the luxurious room, the careful preparation, the fierce protectiveness they'd shown. Caspian moved to sit on the bed's opposite side, mirroring his brother's position. The prophecy told us you'd come, he said quietly. But it didn't make us feel what we feel. That's all us, Isla. All our wolves recognizing their mate. But you don't even know me, Isla protested, tears pricking her eyes. You know nothing about me except that I was rejected and I had a prophesied baby. That's not enough to build a bond on. Then tell us. Corvus's hand moved to rest on the bed beside her, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Tell us who you are, what you love, what makes you angry, what scares you besides us. Isla's laugh came out broken. Everything scares me right now. My daughter's destiny, these marks that appeared out of nowhere, the way my wolf is screaming at me to accept you when my head is telling me to run. What does your heart say? Caspian asked softly. The question made Isla's breath catch. Her heart. The part of her that Garrett had systematically destroyed over months of casual cruelty and public humiliation. The part she'd locked away to survive the rejection. I don't know if my heart works anymore, she whispered. I think he broke it too badly to fix. Something fierce and protective blazed in both twins' eyes. Corvus's hand finally closed over hers, his touch gentle despite the obvious strength in his fingers. Hearts can heal, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Given time and care and someone who values them properly. Let us try, Isla. Let us show you what it's like to be treasured instead of tolerated. I don't know how, she said, the tears finally spilling over. I don't know how to let anyone in anymore. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken? Caspian's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears with devastating tenderness. Then we'll work with broken. We'll cherish every piece of you, shattered or whole, until you remember what it feels like to be valued. Aurora made a small sound from the nursery, and Maris appeared in the doorway. She's hungry again, the healer said with a knowing smile. I'll bring her to you. Corvus stood immediately, moving to help Maris bring the cradle closer to the bed so Isla wouldn't have to move. Together they positioned it within easy reach, and Isla found herself once again holding her daughter, feeling Aurora's tiny weight settle against her chest. The baby latched hungrily, and Isla felt some of her tension ease. This she knew. This was simple and right, and had nothing to do with complicated feelings or forming bonds. Except it did. Because as Aurora nursed, the mark on her forehead began to glow brighter, and Isla watched in fascination as the matching marks on the twins' foreheads responded, pulsing in time with their daughter's heartbeat. "It's beautiful," she whispered, unable to look away from the synchronized glow. The marks, the way they respond to each other. "They're bonding," Maris said quietly from where she stood observing, the three marks recognizing their connection. "By the time Aurora is weaned, the bond between the four of you will be unshakable. Whether you choose to complete the mate bond or not, you'll always be connected through her." The words should have felt like a trap, but instead, looking at her daughter's perfect face, seeing the gentle way both twins watched Aurora with such obvious love, Isla felt something in her chest loosen. Maybe being connected to them wouldn't be so terrible. Maybe being protected and valued and chosen every day wouldn't be the prison she feared. Maybe, just maybe, the goddess had known what she was doing. "I need you to understand something," Isla said quietly, drawing both twins' attention back to her. "I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and be ready to complete the mate bond. This," she gestured between the three of them, "whatever this becomes, it's going to take time. I need to heal, need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by someone else's rejection." "We know," Corvus said, his voice gentle, "and we'll wait, for as long as you need." "But I want to try," Isla continued, surprised by her own words. "I want to believe that not all mates are like Garrett, that you meant what you said about cherishing broken pieces." "We meant every word," Caspian said fiercely, "and we'll prove it, every single day." Aurora finished nursing and made a small sound of contentment. Isla lifted her to her shoulder, gently patting her back, and felt her daughter's warm breath against her neck. The mark on Aurora's forehead pulsed once more, bright and certain, as if approving of Isla's tentative decision. "Can I ask you something?" Isla said, looking between the twins. "Anything," they answered in unison. "When you felt the call tonight, when you knew I was in labor, did you hesitate, even for a second? Did you think about not coming?" Both twins shook their heads immediately. "Never," Corvus said. "The moment we felt you, felt your distress, nothing else mattered. Not our kingdom, not our duties, not the consequences of abandoning everything to run toward you. You were calling, and we answered. That's what mates do." "That's what we'll always do," Caspian added, "whether the bond completes or not. Whether you ever come to love us or not, you call and we'll answer, every single time." Isla felt something crack open in her chest, letting in a thin sliver of light. Hope, fragile and terrifying, but real. "I think I'd like to sleep now," she said quietly. Can Aurora stay in here? I know you have nursemaids, but I don't want her far away." "The cradle stays right here," Corvus assured her, moving to position it even closer to the bed. "And if you need anything at all during the night, pull this cord." He showed her a silk rope hanging beside the bed. "It rings directly in our chambers. We'll come immediately." "Your chambers are close?" Isla asked, and hated how her voice sounded. Hopeful, needy. "Right next door," Caspian said, pointing to a door she hadn't noticed before. "Connected to yours through that door. We can hear if Aurora cries, if you call out. We're never far, Isla." The knowledge should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt safe. Maris laid out the healing salves and pain drafts as promised, explaining dosages before bowing and taking her leave. The twins hesitated by the door, clearly reluctant to go, but not wanting to overstay their welcome. "Thank you," Isla said, the words inadequate for everything they'd done. "For delivering Aurora, for saving my life, for bringing us here, for giving me time. Thank you." Corvus's expression softened into something that made Isla's breath catch. "You never have to thank us for protecting what's ours," he said quietly. "Sleep well, Isla. We'll be right next door if you need us." They left, the door closing softly behind them. And Isla was alone with her daughter for the first time since the chaos began. She lay back against the pillows, feeling her exhausted body finally start to surrender to sleep. But before she let herself drift, she reached out and touched the mark on Aurora's forehead, feeling the warmth there. "What have we gotten ourselves into, little one?" she whispered. "What kind of life is waiting for us here?" Aurora's only answer was a soft sigh, the mark on her forehead glowing gently in the darkness. And somewhere beyond the door, Isla could have sworn she heard two male voices, low and warm, talking quietly about their newfound family. Isla's eyes had just drifted closed when she heard it. Voices beyond the connecting door, low and tense. She couldn't make out words at first, just the cadence of conversation that held an edge she hadn't heard from the twins before. Aurora slept peacefully in her cradle, the mark on her forehead casting a soft glow that pulsed with each tiny breath. Isla knew she should sleep, that her body desperately needed rest. But something about the tone of those voices made her wolf prick her ears, alert and wary. She pushed herself up carefully, wincing at the soreness that radiated through her lower body. The pain draft Maris had left sat on the bedside table, but Isla ignored it. She needed to be clear-headed for whatever was happening beyond that door. Moving as quietly as she could, Isla crossed to the connecting door. It was slightly ajar, not closed completely, and through the gap she could see firelight flickering, could hear the voices more clearly now. "We should have told her," Caspian's voice, tight with frustration, "before we brought her here, before she started to trust us." "And say what exactly?" Corvus countered, his tone matching his brother's. "That the prophecy requires more than just delivering the child? That the mate bond must be completed within the moon cycle or Aurora's mark will fade?" Isla's blood turned to ice. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling the gasp that wanted to escape. The mate bond had to be completed within a moon cycle? That was less than a month. And they'd said nothing, had told her she could have all the time she needed. They'd lied. "She deserves to know the truth," Caspian insisted. "She deserves to make an informed choice about the bond, not have it forced on her by a deadline we kept secret." "And if we tell her, what then?" Corvus's voice was harsh. "She's already terrified, already broken from her last mate. You want to add the pressure of a ticking clock? Tell her that if she doesn't accept us within a month, her daughter loses everything?" "Yes," Caspian said firmly, "because that's what honesty looks like, that's what respect looks like, not hiding the truth because we're afraid of how she'll react. She'll run." Corvus's words were flat, certain. "The moment she knows there's a time limit, she'll panic and run. And then we lose everything. Aurora loses her protection. The territories lose the prophesied child. All because we were honest about a deadline that might not even be real." "Might not be real." Caspian's voice rose slightly. "You heard the same seer I did. She was clear. The bond must be completed within the lunar cycle of Aurora's birth, or the marks will fade and the prophecy will be broken." Isla's knees gave out. She sank to the floor beside the door, her back against the cold stone wall, trying to breathe through the panic flooding her system. Everything they'd said about taking time, about waiting as long as she needed, had been a lie. A beautiful, convincing lie designed to make her feel safe, while they manipulated her toward the bond they needed her to accept. "Maybe the seer was wrong," Corvus was saying. "Maybe we have more time than we think. All I know is that if we pressure Isla now, while she's still raw from rejection, we'll destroy any chance of her truly accepting us. And if we wait too long, we destroy Aurora's destiny," Caspian shot back. "How is that better? How is lying to our mate? Letting her believe she has all the time in the world when we know she doesn't? How is that showing her respect? Their mate." The words that had sounded so certain earlier now felt like chains. They didn't want her because of who she was. They wanted her because they had to. Because without completing the bond, their prophesied child would lose everything that made her special. Isla had been a means to an end. Again. "What would you have us do?" Corvus demanded. Go in there right now and tell her that despite everything we said about taking time, she actually needs to accept us within 3 weeks, or her daughter's mark fades? Tell her that every gentle word, every promise to wait, was conditional on a deadline we deliberately hid from her? Yes, Caspian said quietly. That's exactly what we should do. Because she'll find out eventually. And when she does, when she realizes we've been lying from the moment we met her, she'll never forgive us. And she'll be right not to. Isla's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the cold floor, trying to ground herself, trying to think through the roaring in her ears. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to decide whether to bond with 2 males she'd just met, or watch her daughter lose the destiny that had nearly killed them both to fulfill. It wasn't a choice. It was a trap. She's stronger than you think, Caspian continued. She survived Garrett's betrayal, survived rejection while pregnant, survived a premature birth under impossible circumstances. She can handle the truth. Or it will break what's left of her, Corvus countered, and I won't be the one to do that. I won't be another male who destroys her. Then you're choosing to destroy her later instead of now, Caspian said, and his voice held such frustration that Isla could picture him pacing. When she finds out we lied, when she realizes we manipulated her with false promises, that will hurt so much worse than telling her the truth tonight. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Isla could hear her own heartbeat, could feel her wolf whining in confusion and betrayal. The creature had been so certain the twins were their salvation. But now... I need air, Corvus said finally. I need to think. Isla heard footsteps, a door opening and closing. Then silence again, broken only by Caspian's quiet cursing. She should move, should get back to bed before he came to check on her, should pretend she'd heard nothing, knew nothing. But her body wouldn't cooperate. She sat frozen on the floor, her back against the wall, staring at nothing as everything she'd started to believe shattered around her. The connecting door opened fully. Caspian stood there, his crimson eyes widening with shock when he saw her on the floor. Isla, what are you... Then understanding crossed his face. Horror and regret and resignation all at once. You heard, he said flatly. Not a question. Isla couldn't speak. Could only stare at him as tears started streaming down her face. Silent. Damning. Caspian moved toward her slowly, dropping to his knees a few feet away. Close enough to reach, but not touching. How much did you hear? Enough. Her voice came out broken, barely recognizable. Enough to know that everything you said was a lie, that you don't actually want me, you need me. To complete your prophecy, to keep Aurora's mark from fading. That's not... Caspian started, then stopped. His hands clenched into fists against his thighs. It's more complicated than that. Is it? Isla's laugh was bitter. Because it sounds pretty simple to me. You have 3 weeks to convince me to accept the mate bond, while my daughter loses everything. And you thought lying about it would make me more likely to comply. I didn't want to lie, Caspian said, his voice raw. I told Corvus we should tell you everything from the beginning, that you deserved to make an informed choice. But he convinced you to keep quiet. Isla pushed herself up the wall, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. To make me think I had all the time I needed while secretly the clock was ticking. Isla, please. Caspian stood too, his hands reaching toward her, then dropping. The bond that's forming between us, it's real. What we feel for you, that's not fake. The deadline doesn't change that. Doesn't it? Isla's voice rose and she fought to keep it quiet so Aurora wouldn't wake. How am I supposed to know what's real? How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've been lying from the moment you arrived? We saved your life, Caspian said, and there was desperation in his tone now. We delivered Aurora when no one else could. We brought you here to heal, to recover. That was all real. You brought me here to secure your prophecy, Isla corrected, and the words tasted like ash. To make sure Aurora's mark stayed active, to get me comfortable enough that I'd accept the bond before the deadline you were hiding. Caspian flinched as if she'd struck him. That's not fair. Yes, the prophecy is part of this, but what we feel for you, that's separate. That's ours. I don't believe you. The words came out flat, dead. I don't believe anything anymore. Isla moved past him, heading back to her room, to Aurora's cradle. She needed to hold her daughter, needed something real and honest in a world that had just proven itself false again. Caspian followed, his voice urgent. Isla, wait. Let me explain. Let me call Corvus back and we can all talk about this, figure out what to do. There's nothing to figure out. Isla lifted Aurora from the cradle, holding her sleeping daughter close. The mark on Aurora's forehead pulsed gently, unaware of the chaos surrounding her birth. You made your choice when you decided to lie. When you decided I couldn't be trusted with the truth. That's not what happened, Caspian protested. We were trying to protect you, trying to give you space to heal without the added pressure of a deadline. You were trying to manipulate me, Isla said, and her voice was cold now, all the warmth from earlier completely gone. Just like Garrett manipulated me, made me think I was valued when really I was just convenient, just a vessel for what you actually wanted. Don't compare us to him. Caspian's eyes flashed brighter crimson, his wolf rising in offense. We would never treat you the way he did. We would never make you feel worthless or unwanted. You just did. Isla turned to face him fully, Aurora held protectively against her chest. By lying. By pretending I had a choice when really there's a ticking clock forcing my hand. By making me start to trust you when you knew you were hiding something this important. Caspian's expression crumbled. I'm sorry. Goddess, Isla. I'm so sorry. You're right. We should have told you. I should have insisted we tell you. But I was scared. Scared that if you knew, you'd refuse the bond just to spite us. Just to protect yourself from being forced into something you're not ready for. And now? Isla asked. Now that I know, what happens now? Now we tell you everything. Caspian took a step closer, his hands spread in supplication. The full prophecy. Every detail the seer shared. And then you make your choice. Accept the bond within the lunar cycle, or don't. But at least you'll know what you're choosing. 3 weeks, Isla said, the words tasting like poison. I have 3 weeks to decide whether to bind myself to 2 males who've already proven they'll lie to manipulate me into doing what they need. That's not a choice. That's coercion dressed up as destiny. It doesn't have to be, Caspian said desperately. We can earn your trust in 3 weeks. We can prove that the bond is worth accepting regardless of the deadline. Can you? Isla's laugh was hollow. Because right now, all you've proven is that you're just like every other male I've known. Willing to say whatever it takes to get what you want. Willing to hide the truth when it's inconvenient. Movement in the doorway made both of them turn. Corvus stood there, his expression haunted. She heard everything, Caspian said quietly. Corvus's eyes found Isla's, and the regret she saw there was almost enough to make her falter. Almost. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough. You were never supposed to find out like this. I wasn't supposed to find out at all, Isla corrected. That was the plan, wasn't it? Keep me in the dark until the bond formed naturally, until I accepted without ever knowing I was being pressured. That's not... Corvus started, then stopped. His shoulders sagged. Yes, that was the plan. And it was wrong. Caspian was right. You deserved to know from the beginning. But you didn't tell me. Isla's voice was steady now, cold. You made a choice to lie. Both of you. And that tells me everything I need to know about what this bond would actually look like. About whether I could ever truly trust you. Please. Corvus moved into the room, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller, defeated. Give us a chance to make this right, 3 weeks. Let us prove that we can be honest, that we can be the mates you deserve. And if I refuse, Isla asked, if I decide that no matter what you do, I can't accept the bond, what happens to Aurora then? Both twins flinched. Caspian looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Corvus at least had the courage to hold her gaze. The mark fades, he said quietly. She becomes an ordinary wolf, still powerful, still ours to protect and raise, but not prophesied, not destined to unite the territories. So my choice isn't really a choice, Isla said, because choosing to refuse the bond means choosing to rob my daughter of her destiny, means taking away the very thing that nearly killed us both to fulfill. I'm sorry, Corvus whispered. I'm so sorry, Isla. This isn't fair to you. None of this is fair. No, Isla agreed. It's not. Aurora stirred in her arms, making small sounds that suggested she'd wake soon and want to feed. Isla looked down at her daughter's perfect face, at the mark that glowed with such promise, and felt something break inside her chest. She couldn't refuse the bond. No matter how betrayed she felt, how manipulated, she couldn't take Aurora's destiny away, couldn't make that choice for her daughter. But she also couldn't forgive the twins for lying, couldn't pretend that this revelation didn't change everything. Get out, she said quietly, not looking at either of them. Both of you, I need to think. Isla, Caspian started. Now. Her voice cracked. Please, just go. They went. The door closed softly behind them, leaving Isla alone with her daughter and the ruins of everything she'd started to believe. And as Aurora began to cry, hungry and innocent and unaware of the chaos her birth had created, Isla held her close and let her own tears fall silently into her daughter's soft hair. Isla's tears soaked into Aurora's blanket as she fed her daughter, the rhythmic suckling the only sound in the oppressive silence of the room. Her mind spun in circles, trying to find a way out of the trap that had closed around her. But every path led back to the same impossible choice: accept the bond with males who'd lied to her, or destroy her daughter's destiny. Aurora finished nursing and made a small sound of contentment. Isla lifted her to her shoulder, patting gently, and felt the baby's warm breath against her neck. The mark on Aurora's forehead pulsed with each tiny exhale, a constant reminder of what was at stake. What do I do? Isla whispered into her daughter's soft hair. How do I choose between protecting you and protecting myself? Aurora's only answer was a small burp, followed by a sigh of satisfaction. The innocence of it made Isla's chest ache. Her daughter didn't ask to be prophesied, didn't ask for any of this weight to be placed on her tiny shoulders before she could even open her eyes properly. A soft knock at the connecting door made Isla's body tense. She didn't answer, didn't invite whoever it was inside. But the door opened anyway, just a crack. Isla, Corvus's voice quiet and careful. I know you told us to leave, but there's something you need to know. Something we should have told you hours ago. More lies? Isla's voice was flat. She didn't turn to look at him, kept her focus on Aurora's perfect face. No. The door opened wider, and she heard both twins enter, felt their presence like heat at her back. The truth, all of it, even the parts that make us look worse. Despite herself, Isla turned. Both twins stood just inside the doorway, their expressions wrecked. Corvus's eyes were red-rimmed, as if he'd been crying. Caspian's hands were clenched at his sides, trembling slightly. The prophecy doesn't just require the bond to be completed within the lunar cycle, Corvus said, his voice rough. It requires your willing acceptance, not coerced, not forced, genuinely willing. Isla stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. What does that mean? It means we can't manipulate you into accepting us, Caspian explained, taking a careful step forward. The magic will know if you're only agreeing because of Aurora. If you're accepting the bond out of duty rather than genuine desire, the marks will fade anyway. The prophecy will be broken, regardless. The words hit Isla like a physical blow. So, even if I agree, if I go through with completing the bond just to save Aurora's destiny, it won't work? No. Corvus's expression was anguished. It has to be real, Isla. You have to actually want us, want the bond. Want to be our mate, not because of prophecy or pressure or your daughter, but because you choose us for ourselves. Isla's laugh was bitter. And you thought lying to me would somehow make me more likely to genuinely want you? That hiding the deadline would create authentic feelings? We weren't thinking clearly, Caspian admitted. The moment we felt you in labor, felt your distress, logic went out the window. All we could think about was getting to you, saving you, keeping you safe. And securing your prophecy, Isla added coldly. Yes, Corvus said, and his honesty was brutal. And securing the prophecy. Both things were true at once. We wanted to save you because you're our mate, and we wanted to save the prophecy because we've been waiting for it our entire lives. Those motivations aren't separate, Isla. They're tangled together in ways we don't fully understand ourselves. Isla clutched Aurora closer, her daughter's warmth the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. So what now? You've told me the full truth finally. What do you expect me to do with it? Make a choice. Caspian moved closer, slowly, until he could drop to his knees beside her bed. His crimson eyes were level with hers, open and vulnerable in a way that made her throat tight. Not for Aurora, not for the prophecy, for yourself. What do you want, Isla? Setting aside everything else, what does your heart want? My heart is broken, Isla whispered. I told you that. I don't know if it can want anything anymore. Then let us help you find out. Corvus moved to kneel on the bed's other side, mirroring his brother's position. 3 weeks. Give us 3 weeks to prove we can be honest. To prove we can earn your trust. To prove that the bond forming between us is worth accepting regardless of prophecy or deadline. And if, at the end of 3 weeks, I still can't genuinely want you, Isla forced herself to ask, if I can't get past the lies, what then? Both twins' expressions crumbled, but Corvus was the one who answered. Then we'll respect your choice, and we'll raise Aurora together as parents bound by prophecy, but not by mate bond. She'll still be protected, still be loved, still be ours to cherish. The mark will fade, yes, but she'll have a mother who models the importance of protecting her own heart, of not accepting less than she deserves. The words were pretty, noble, but Isla could see the devastation in both their eyes at the thought of her refusing them, could feel through the forming bond how much it would cost them to watch her walk away. You don't want that, she said quietly. Neither of you. You want me to accept the bond, to complete it, to be your mate and Aurora's mother, and the key to your prophecy all at once. Of course we want that, Caspian said, his voice raw. We want it more than we've ever wanted anything, but not if it means destroying you to get it. Not if accepting us breaks what's left of your heart. We've seen what forced bonds look like, Corvus added. Seen mates who stay together out of duty rather than love. Seen the slow death of spirits crushed by obligation. We won't do that to you, Isla. We'd rather lose the prophecy and raise Aurora as co-parents than watch you die inside while bonded to males you can't trust. Isla looked between them, these powerful creatures kneeling before her like supplicants. They could force this, could use their authority as blood emperors to compel her acceptance, could manipulate or threaten or push until she gave them what they needed. But they weren't. They were giving her the choice, the real choice, even knowing it might cost them everything. I don't know if I can trust you, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know if 3 weeks is enough time to rebuild what you shattered tonight with your lies. Then don't trust us yet, Caspian said. Just give us the chance to earn it. Let us prove through actions, not words, that we can be the mates you deserve. And if I can't? Isla's tears started again, hot and angry. If at the end of 3 weeks I still feel like this, still feel betrayed and manipulated and terrified, then you refuse the bond, Corvus said simply. And we accept that refusal with grace. We'll still protect you, still stand between you and anyone who'd try to use Aurora, still be her fathers in every way that matters. But we'll respect your boundaries, respect your choice. Aurora stirred against Isla's chest, making a small sound of protest at the tension in her mother's body. Isla forced herself to breathe, to calm, for her daughter's sake. 3 weeks, she heard herself say. You have 3 weeks to prove I can trust you, to prove the bond is worth accepting for its own sake, not because of Aurora or prophecy. Relief crashed across both twins' faces, so intense it was almost painful to witness. But, Isla continued, her voice hardening, if I find out you've lied about anything else, if I discover you're hiding more truths or manipulating me in ways I haven't caught yet, it's over. Immediately. I don't care about prophecies or destinies. I'll refuse the bond and you'll have to live with the consequences. Agreed, they said in unison. And you don't touch me, Isla added, the words coming from some deep, protective place inside her, not beyond what's necessary for healing or caring for Aurora. No attempts to use physical contact to influence the bond. No casual touches meant to make me comfortable with your presence. You earn my trust through honesty and respect, not through proximity. Both twins flinched but nodded. Whatever you need, Caspian said quietly. Isla looked down at Aurora, at the mark that glowed with such promise, and felt the weight of her choice settle across her shoulders. She was giving the twins a chance, but she was also preparing for the possibility that at the end of 3 weeks, she'd have to choose her own healing over her daughter's destiny. And she didn't know which outcome terrified her more. I need to sleep now, she said, exhaustion finally overwhelming everything else. Aurora needs to sleep, and I can't process anything else tonight. Of course. Corvus stood, his movements careful. We'll be next door if you need anything at all. And Isla? Caspian paused at the door, his crimson eyes meeting hers one last time. I'm sorry for lying, for hiding the truth, for making you doubt whether you could trust us. I'm sorrier than I can express in words. So am I, Corvus added. We failed you tonight, but we won't fail you again. That's a promise. They left, the door closing softly behind them, and Isla was alone again with her daughter, and the impossible choice that awaited her in 3 weeks' time. She laid Aurora in the cradle, watching the mark on her forehead pulse gently. Then she climbed back into bed, her body screaming with exhaustion and pain, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to the same thoughts, the same fears. What if she couldn't learn to trust them in 3 weeks? What if she refused the bond and destroyed Aurora's destiny? What if she accepted the bond and destroyed herself? Through the connecting door, she could hear low voices, the twins talking quietly, their words indistinct but their tone clear, anguished, desperate, afraid. Good, Isla thought viciously. Let them be afraid. Let them understand what it feels like to have everything hanging by a thread that could snap at any moment. Let them feel what she'd been feeling for months. But even as the bitter thought crossed her mind, Isla felt her wolf whimper. The creature didn't understand the human complexities of trust and betrayal. All she knew was that their mates were nearby and hurting, and every instinct screamed to go to them. No, Isla whispered into the darkness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Her wolf whined in protest but subsided, curling back into the quiet place she inhabited. And Isla lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the goddess who'd created this prophecy understood the cruelty of it. The impossible choice between love and trust, between destiny and healing, between saving her daughter's future and protecting her own shattered heart. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to decide which mattered more. Isla's eyes were still fixed on the ceiling when she heard the soft creak of the connecting door opening again. She didn't turn her head, didn't acknowledge the presence she felt entering the room. Her body was too exhausted, her heart too raw. Isla, Corvus's voice was barely above a whisper. I know you said not to come back, but Aurora's mark just flared, brighter than before. I think something's happening. That got Isla's attention. She pushed herself up, ignoring the protest from her sore body, and looked toward the cradle. Aurora's mark was indeed glowing brighter, pulsing with an intensity that cast dancing shadows across the nursery walls. Caspian appeared behind his brother, his expression concerned. It started a few minutes ago. We could feel it through the forming bond, like she's trying to tell us something. Isla moved to the cradle, her bare feet silent on the plush rugs. She reached down to touch her daughter's forehead, and the moment her fingers made contact with the mark, Warmth flooded through her. Not painful, not frightening, just warm and certain and somehow knowing. Images flashed through Isla's mind, not her own memories, but something else, something older. She saw the twins as children, barely walking, already inseparable. Saw them growing up under the weight of prophecy, watching other wolves find their mates while they waited alone. Saw them standing on battlements, looking out over their kingdom, wondering if their destined mate would ever come. She saw their fear tonight. Not fear of losing the prophecy, but fear of losing her. Fear that their lie had destroyed the one chance they'd have at true happiness. And underneath it all, she felt their love. Raw and powerful and absolutely genuine. Love that had ignited the moment they'd touched her during Aurora's delivery. Love that had nothing to do with prophecy and everything to do with recognition, with coming home. The vision faded, and Isla found herself gasping, her hand still on Aurora's mark. Both twins had moved closer, their faces etched with concern. "What did you see?" Caspian asked quietly. Isla looked at him, then at Corvus, seeing them clearly for the first time since the devastating revelation. Yes, they'd lied. Yes, they'd hidden the deadline. But the fear that had driven that choice, she understood it now. Had felt it echoing through the bond Aurora had just shown her. They'd been afraid of losing her before they'd even had a chance to know her. "I saw you," she whispered. "Both of you. Your whole lives. Waiting. Aurora showed you." Corvus's voice held wonder. "The prophecy child showed you our truth." Isla's hand trembled as she lifted it from Aurora's forehead. The mark's glow had returned to its normal, gentle pulse, as if her daughter had said what she needed to say and was content to return to sleep. "You really have been waiting," Isla said, and the anger that had been burning in her chest since she'd overheard their conversation began to cool. Not disappear, but transform into something else. Understanding, maybe. 35 years, alone. "By choice," Caspian said quickly. "We chose to wait for you, for our true mate. That was never a burden, Isla. It was hope." "But you were afraid I'd refuse you if I knew about the deadline," Isla continued, processing everything Aurora had shown her. "Afraid that telling me the truth would make me see the bond as obligation instead of choice." "Yes." Corvus's admission was raw. "And we were wrong to let that fear drive us to lie. We should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning." Isla moved away from the cradle toward the twins. They tensed, clearly uncertain what she was about to do. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the exhaustion in their faces, the fear in their eyes. "I'm still angry," she said quietly. "Still hurt that you lied. Still terrified of trusting anyone after what Garrett did to me." Both twins nodded, accepting her words without argument. "But," Isla continued, and saw hope spark in their crimson eyes, "Aurora just showed me something I needed to see. Your truth, your hearts, the part of you that's been aching for as long as you can remember." "Isla," Caspian started, but she held up a hand. "I'm not saying I forgive you yet," she said firmly, "and I'm not saying I'm ready to complete the bond tonight. But I'm saying I'm willing to try, really try, not because of the deadline or the prophecy, but because underneath the lies, I felt something real." "You did?" Corvus's voice broke on the words. "When you delivered Aurora," Isla said, her own voice thick with emotion. "When you held my hand and told me I was strong. When you poured your life force into me to stop the bleeding. When you gave me a choice, even knowing it might cost you everything. In those moments, I felt it. The bond, real and true and terrifying." She took a shaky breath, feeling tears start again. But these weren't tears of betrayal. These were something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I don't know if 3 weeks will be enough," she admitted. "I don't know if I can fully trust you by then. But I want to try, not for Aurora, not for the prophecy, for me. Because even though you lied, even though you hurt me. I felt safer in your arms tonight than I've felt in months. Caspian's hand moved slowly toward hers, telegraphing the movement so she could pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his fingers laced through hers, warm and careful. We'll earn your trust, he said fiercely, every single day, through actions, not words. Corvus mirrored his brother's movement on her other side, his hand finding hers with the same gentle certainty. And if at the end of 3 weeks you still can't fully accept us, we'll take whatever you're willing to give, even if it's just co-parenting, even if the mate bond never completes. Isla looked between them, these powerful males who'd upended her entire life in a single night, who'd delivered her daughter with gentle hands, who'd lied to protect themselves, but were now offering her complete honesty even knowing it might destroy them. Then prove it, she said softly. Prove that the bond is worth the risk. Prove that trusting you won't destroy me the way trusting Garrett did. We will, they said in unison, and the certainty in their voices made her wolf sing. From the cradle, Aurora made a small sound of contentment, as if approving of her parents' tentative truce. The mark on her forehead glowed softly, and Isla watched as the matching marks on the twins' foreheads responded, pulsing in perfect synchronization. 3 crescents, 3 hearts, beginning the long journey toward becoming one. I need to sleep now, Isla said, exhaustion finally winning, and you both look like you're about to collapse. We're not leaving you alone, Corvus said firmly. Not after everything, not when you're still healing. Isla wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her boundaries, but the thought of being alone in this massive room, with only her newborn daughter and her spiraling thoughts for company, was suddenly unbearable. The bed is big enough, she heard herself say. You stay on your side. I stay on mine. And if either of you tries anything, I'll make you regret it. Relief flooded both their faces. They moved carefully, removing their boots and outer clothing but keeping their shirts and pants on, respecting her boundaries. Corvus positioned himself on one side of the bed, Caspian on the other, with a careful space between them and Isla in the middle. She settled into the pillows, feeling the warmth of their bodies on either side without actual contact. It should have felt wrong. Sleeping beside 2 males she barely knew, but instead it felt safe, protected. Isla? Caspian's voice came soft in the darkness. Yes? Thank you for giving us this chance. We won't waste it. You'd better not, she said, but there was no heat in the words. Just exhaustion and tentative hope and the beginning of something that might, possibly, become trust. She closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of their breathing on either side of her, feeling the marks on their foreheads pulsing in time with Aurora's, feeling the mate bond humming between them, incomplete but present. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to decide if she could truly open her heart to them. 3 weeks to discover if the bond was worth the risk. But for tonight, for this moment, it was enough to simply breathe. To be held without being touched. To rest without being alone. Aurora's mark glowed softly in the cradle beside the bed, casting gentle light across the 4 of them. A family bound by prophecy and pain, beginning the fragile work of becoming bound by something more. Something real. Something chosen. Something that might, with time and honesty and care, become love. And as Isla finally surrendered to sleep, surrounded by the warmth of her mates and the soft breathing of her daughter, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. The hope that maybe, just maybe, the goddess had known what she was doing after all. That breaking had been necessary to build something stronger. That rejection had been the path to being chosen. That the hardest journey could lead to the softest landing. Sleep well, our mate, Corvus whispered into the darkness. Dream of better tomorrows, Caspian added. And Isla, caught between 2 heartbeats that matched her own, between a past that had shattered her and a future that might heal her, whispered back the only truth she knew for certain. Stay. They stayed. Thank you for watching. Next story drops soon.